Now I'd like to talk about hope, fantasy, and denial. Here are my goals. Going to want to talk about what are the cues, the verbal cues that are giving you an idea of when relative caregivers are going from hope to denial, what those intervention strategies might be that you might want to use in terms of those scripts to help them manage the hope, manage the denial, and then how is it different? So I'd like to start off with an exercise. Here's my question to you. And you can answer it on a personal level or as a professional looking at caregivers. Here's the question. What does hope do for you and give you? Motivation. Confidence. Courage. Positive outlook.
Strength.
Excuse me?
Strength.
Yes, strength. Okay. When does hope become denial? Or what problem comes from hope when it becomes denial? Confusion. Disappointment. Loss.
Maybe not meeting needs.
Not meeting needs. Mm-hmm. Rationalization. Justification. How do you know from your work when a client is going into denial?
When they stop turning paperwork in.
Stop turning in paperwork.
Taking calls, not showing up for appointments.
Not showing up for appointments. Making promises that they don't keep. Anything else that lets you know when they're in denial? Relapsing. Saying they don't need the treatment. I don't have a problem. I don't need to see you. Okay, all right.
Maybe what they say and what you see are two different things.
Yeah, what they're saying and what you see are two different things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in control. I'm paying my bills. Everything is fine. But then you're getting notices that are showing that they're not doing it. Okay. When we think of kinship care, sources of hope, parents, the children are going home. Big source for caregivers. Expecting the birth parent to accomplish the requirements for reunification. Big source of hope. You know, they're going to follow through with the plan, which could include drug and alcohol treatment, parenting classes, getting a job, recovery, anger management. But then the actions don't go with it. Okay, that's where it slips from hope into denial. All right, that first one, parent-child reunification, you've got the hope, but you know they're in denial when they're not making plans for what? The child staying. And it's right there in their face. Caregivers' hope or resuming and pursuing previous lifestyles and goals. I'm going to be a grandparent again. That's the hope. And in perceptions of the birth parent's character and personality, they can do it. I know they can do it. I raised them that way. And then the child's hope for reunification. That could be another major source. And then that part of perception of the birth parent's character and personality also has to do with their loyalty, the attachment, the bonding. Yeah, that can keep them hoping too. Here are your cues. I got a lot of verbal cues up here, don't I? I know my son. I know my daughter. He'll get it together this time. Now, that becomes denial when this time is after 5 other times, 6 other times. It's like, how many times? You know, and that would be your question. That would be your response. Oh, that's great, but how many times has it been? Oh, 10. Oh, denial. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm saying that's a red flag for you. Okay. He couldn't have done that. I didn't raise him that way. She told me she didn't do it. hope, but it slips into denial. Because again, what do the facts say? What do the evidence say? And when you ask them, well, how do you know? You don't get an answer. How do you know? Besides, because that's your son, because that's your daughter. I'm looking forward to the kids going back home with their parents. And then you ask the question, and if they don't, then what? Silence. Hope becomes a problem when a caregiver is not able to make alternative plans. That's your litmus test. I'll be glad when I can just be a grandparent again, and if not, then what? I don't plan to be taking care of kids for the rest of my life, and suppose you do. Then what? You're that mirror, you're that reality, you're that voice of reality, okay? I don't plan to take care of kids. You and your agencies want her to fail. It's your attitudes that make her give up. How is that denial? Tell me what's wrong with that statement. Blaming the agency instead of the child, not holding the child responsible. That's the problem with that. Scapegoating the agency. You don't want her to get the kids back. That's why she's not cooperating. Same thing, scapegoating. I don't want to crush the children's hopes of returning home, especially after their parents have made so many promises. You get to hear that a lot. That can become denial when you don't do what? Plan for the children to know. When you're not thinking about what's that conversation going to be like if they don't go home. Don't have a plan. If anything, I don't have to worry about that because they're going home. I don't have to make that plan because I'm going to be the grandparent. I don't have to make that plan because they didn't do it. I don't have to make that plan because they're going to follow through this time. So it's the avoidance piece that lets you know that that's why they're in denial. I don't want my son to think that I've given up on him or that I believe the things they're saying are true about him. So no, I'm not going to adopt. I'm not going to take guardianship. No, I'm not going to believe those stories. I don't want him to think that I don't believe him. If to admit that my son, my daughter, and my sister or brother is a failure is to admit that who else might be a failure? Me or my family. Their behavior, their failure is a reflection on who? Me. So that's why I don't want them to know that I'm not going to do it, because I want them to know that I'm still loyal to them. So, here are your goals. Implement and follow through with those safety plans, even if you don't believe them. Hope can stop you from following through with a safety plan. Hope can stop you from following through with permanency planning. Hope can follow through with you not addressing the best needs of the children. Hope can stop you from putting the needs of the children before the caregiver, before the birth parent. Develop concrete plans for reunification if and when necessary. Know when and how to engage the child in alternative planning. When do you need to let the child know that their hopes aren't going to come to fruition? You may not be going home. Don't project the caregivers or the birth parents' hopes onto the children. That means keeping them to yourself. And there's a formula for that. We're going to talk about that. And then reinforce the child's feelings of being protected and believed. Many of the children that are going into the care of the kinship caregivers are coming from trauma. Part of addressing trauma is getting the child to disclose. Getting the child to disclose means making them feel safe to disclose. And if that child believes that you're more attached to the birth parent than them, what do you think's going to happen? They won't disclose. Because your hope that mom and dad didn't do it is going to make them not disclose. And they can pick up on that. So here's some scripts that you might want to consider. Normalize the hope. It's okay. You should be hopeful. But don't let your hopes get in the way of alternative plannings, because if you don't, somebody else will. The buy-in for caregivers into that script will be that if you don't, somebody else will plan. And if you want control, you need to come up with the alternative plan, even if you don't think it's necessary. If not you, then who? So their buy-in is going to be, yeah, I guess you're right, because I don't want anybody else to control my life. I don't want anybody else to talk about or place my children. So when you use that script, that's what's going to get the buy-in. If you should be hopeful, but is your hopes going to be able to get in the way, and is it going to stop the courts from planning? And here's the conversation that is so crucial. This is what you want to get caregivers to do. I hope your son completes rehab, but if not, then what? That's all you want caregivers to do. And this is important because, you don't have to get into saying you're in denial, or you have a problem. You can just get into, hey, I hope you're right. But if not, then what? That's all you have to say. You get out the conflict. You can avoid the conflict. You don't have to argue with them about being in denial. But yeah, if anything, you join with them. I hope you're right, but if not, then what? Develop the plan. This part is so crucial. When do you need to go into a planning? When does a relative caregivers need to do it? The relatives caregivers need to plan needs to be driven by the activity or the inactivity of who? The birth parent. That's what you base it on. Well, you'll know what you need to do or don't do based on what the birth parent's doing. It's their activities or inactivity that will let you know when they need to plan. It's looking at if what they're saying is going along with what they're doing. And if you see a contradiction there, then you need to plan. So you don't have to get into an argument about, well, they're not properly motivated. They didn't follow through. You don't have to get into an argument with them about their kids. By the way, I'm telling you all this based on all the wrong things I did, okay? I got into the argument. I would say, oh, you're into denial. I did all those things, so that's why I could do the if not, then what? Yeah, no, you shouldn't be thinking that. No, think that way. It's okay, but if not, So yeah, that's kind of what it's based on, okay? So for this one, yeah, well, did they complete DNA programs? Was the urine clean this time? Did they show up for court? Have they finished the plans? Are they following through with jobs? Well, if they're doing it, fine. You can be hopeful. But if not, then what? Okay? You seem so loyal to them, and that's great. But what have they done to have earned it? Now, just put it right back on them. What activities, and then not projecting your hopes on the children. The formula there is, don't give the children hopes if they can't handle the disappointment / trauma. That formula makes sense. And I learned this from caregivers. Caregivers will not tell children that the parents are coming over until they're where? There, at the door. Caregivers will not tell the children that the parents are calling until the parents have done what? Called. Caregivers will not tell the children that they're going out on the weekend until the parents do what? Show up. I've learned that from caregivers. So when it's all about, I don't want to have to deal with the trauma, I don't want to have to deal with the disappointment because the kids can't handle it. All right? So if the caregivers, and they do it instinctively, so formalize it. If you see caregivers not doing it, you can just kind of suggest, well, you know what I see other caregivers doing? Because I don't know if the kids can handle that promise that they're going to go back home. I don't know if they can handle the promise that mom's going to finish rehab this time. Maybe you don't need to do that or give it to them. Sometimes the promises are already made. Birth parents do it all the time. You know it. All these lists of promises. I'm going to do this. Rather than get into an argument with the kids and the caregivers about those promises, have the caregivers say, okay, I hope so, but if not, then. Now, how many chances are we going to give them? How long are we going to wait for them to show for the visit? What are we going to do if they don't show up? How are we going to handle your disappointment in a way that doesn't hurt you or me or tear up my house? Okay, I'm kind of joking, all right? All right, but yeah, that's what you need to do if you do have to deal with a different point. And those are the conversations that they need to have with the children. And in some hopes, they don't need to share it with the children, but they need to have the hopes because we know what hope does. It keeps you resilient, but you've got to share those hopes with peers, other adults. Let's not parentify the children. There's some things they don't need to know, that they don't need to hear, and caregivers have to know the boundaries. Yeah, great, go to your groups, get with your friends, you need to have the hopes, it's okay, but these are kids, they're not your peers, let's keep the boundaries. Implementing safety plans. This sounds crazy, but for relative caregivers, well, it's kind of normal. Again, if you don't think the danger is there, then you don't have to put the safety plan in place. They're not going to hurt my children, so yeah, I'm going to let them come in and visit. They wouldn't do that if they go out. They're not going to take them to a drug house. They just wouldn't do that. So it's okay for you to bend the rules. You know, they don't need my supervision. You know, and the conversation that you may need to have is, yeah, well, you don't think that they're going to hurt the children, but somebody does. So what do you need to do to make sure that your son or daughter or brother, sister are not put in a position where they are accused? That may get the buy-in. Their protection of the siblings, their protection of their sons and daughter. So that means you may have to supervise the visit. That means you may have to follow the rules. You may have to make sure that they're not coming in there high. The list goes on. But it's doing to protect them so that they're not in a position of being accused. You know, but it starts with, you don't think they did it? Okay, fine. Let's make sure that they're not accused. They also have to make sure that the children are believed. We talk about trauma. The children need to know, here's the script. You know, how will you make them know? And if they don't know what they need to do to make the children feel safe, they've got to be able to know and say things to the children like, yeah, I know you know I love your mommy, but I also know that mommy may have done things to you that weren't right. They've got to be able to have those kind of scripts when you talk about trauma. You know, because the reality is that a lot of the trauma that they're talking about has been perpetrated and committed by who? Their mom and dad, birth parents. So they've got to feel safe, especially if they know that that's your daughter, that's your brother, that's your sister. Are you going to still like me even if I tell you bad things about mom or dad? Are you going to be angry at me? Are you going to believe me even if I tell you what they did? And those are the things that you have to bring up as a caregiver. So you may need to role play those conversations, role play those scripts that they need to have with their children. Be prepared to do that. Okay? So, in summary, caregivers have to manage their vulnerabilities. Allow caregivers to hope, but you need to have those conversations around if not, then what? Caregivers must first be able to manage their fantasies and hopes before they can help the children recover from the trauma and manage their hopes. So again, the work, the safety planning starts with caregivers first. And I think also what's important is leave them their hope. You don't have to get into the arguments with them about it. You don't have to collude with them about it. But you just want to add that piece, if not, then what, and then get them into the safety planning, get them into the prevention planning, get them into the alternative planning. Okay. That makes sense? Good. All right. Thank you.